The late Dr. Charles Stanley said that you will reap what you sow, greater than you sow, later than you sow, in his life principles. And that's why it's important for you, when you plant the seeds in the ground, to plant seeds that will bear good fruit. Because if you don't go out here and plant seeds that bear good fruit, you're going to have to deal with all of the thorns and briars as they choke out your life later on. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Cancel Vacation. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a social justice social media mob looking to cancel her in this all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Cancel Vacation in paperback and e-readers today. One of my viewers wanted to know my thoughts about what's going on in France right now. Now, over the last week or so, France has been burning after a series of riots in the aftermath of the death of 17-year-old Nahel Marzouk, a 17-year-old boy of Algerian descent. Now, back on June 27th, Nahel Marzouk had been stopped by a police officer in a traffic stop, and over the course of that traffic stop, Nahel Marzouk, a 17-year-old boy, was shot and killed. And after he got shot and killed, this is when many members of the migrant community basically exploded in a rage and started participating in destructive riots all across of France, similar to what happened in 2020 when George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin. However, the violence in France has gotten so intense that basically major parts of the city are burning. And in video footage I have seen that has been disturbing, I have seen cars pushed out of a parking garage, off the top floors of that parking garage, to be dropped like bombs in the middle of the street. And I've also seen places like libraries and churches being set ablaze, not to mention many government buildings. And this kind of violence basically is the kind of violence you would see during a war in a country. But this is going on in France, and sadly, President Emmanuel Macron has not shown any sort of strong leadership as related to trying to contain any of this violence. And this type of violence is the kind of violence you, in some cases, you would think you would want to bring the military in to shut down. But Macron has basically shown completely ineffective leadership as related to this whole situation. And when I take a panoramic perspective of all of the violence going on in France, it really reminds me of something the late Charles Stanley said as part of his life principles, that you will reap more than you sow, later than what you sow, and greater than what you sow, because all of the seeds for this violence that is happening now basically was planted by the French government as it was a part of the European Union. Now, back in 2008 and 2009, many leftists across the globe were celebrating the election of Barack Obama here in America as related to hope and change. And as they were celebrating Barack Obama becoming the first black president all across the European Union, we saw them embracing all of these migrants from African and North African countries coming into the countries. And we saw many of these European Union countries going out here and opening up their borders. And as they opened up their borders back in 2008 and 2009, they thought that many of the migrants they were going to bring into the country would contribute to improving the quality of life and lead to a more so-called diverse experience. However, many of those in government were just being disingenuous. They were not looking to give many of these migrants who are African and North African opportunities. No, what they were looking to do was looking to go out here and create a permanent underclass as related to their society, similar to what we have, what white supremacy wants to build with the black community. They wanted a group of people at the bottom so that they could have a base that they could always depend on and create a codependent relationship with as related to maintaining their economic base and create a base where they could go out here and have economic power over this permanent underclass of people. Because over the last 15 years, since all of those migrants have been embraced by countries like France, we have not seen many of these migrants improve their quality of life. No, what we've seen is a large group of these individuals just get on the welfare rolls, and as they have gotten on the welfare rolls, many of these individuals have not gone out here and looked to improve their quality of life, and they have not been incentivized to do so because the government has placed them into a codependent state. And as it's placed them into a codependent state, what we have seen with many of the migrants is just like Pookie and Ray Ray here in places like New York. What's happening with many of these individuals is that they're sitting there idle on the streets, wandering with no purpose. And as they wander with no purpose as part of the permanent underclass, what happens is they start going and becoming targeted as the menace to society and branded as a menace to society by those on the right, and they are targeted and profiled by police, similar to what happens to black Americans here. And that's what's been happening over the last 15 years in France and many of the other countries of the European Union. And what exacerbates this whole situation is that back in 2009, many people, as they were planting the seeds to bring these migrants in to, again, improve their quality of life, again, they were disingenuous. And what they didn't do was any sort of vetting, which is what was done at Ellis Island back in the days when immigration was popular in the earliest part of the 20th century. People used to vet individuals to see if they had any sort of skills or any sort of training that could make them contribute to society. No, none of that has been done with many of the migrants in France, and as a result, many of the migrants in France are these unemployed and unskilled men. And because you have a large population of unemployed and unskilled men on welfare and are just wandering the streets with no purpose, this is the reason why you have a lot of crime increasing in places like France. And this is why you have a powder keg, because you have a lot of French citizens who are not really happy about seeing their tax dollars being spent to house and take care of individuals as they're out here doing nothing all day and getting themselves into trouble, because an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And as these individuals have just been wandering the streets, what's been happening is, again, they wind up becoming targeted by police, and they wind up getting targeted by police because they see a person who is black, and they see a black person and they think that, okay, person is a criminal. And what happens is a lot of these individuals wind up either possibly wind up committing crimes or being accused of crimes, and they wind up becoming a part of the criminal justice system. And that suits the white supremacist in France, because they really want, again, that permanent underclass to be there so that they can go out here and fund their political system, and again, be able to fund it on the backs of blacks who they can put into their prisons and go out here and use as free prison labor, or go out here and use to be processed through their criminal justice system so they can go out here and get grant money at the expense of these individuals. So again, a lot of this is political, similar to what's going on here in places like America. And what they do is, again, politicians use the permanent underclass to go out here and get the earmark money for themselves. And what they do is use these individuals, again, as a way to get cash for themselves. Meanwhile, these individuals remain in a perpetual state of poverty, thinking that they are going to get some sort of improvement to their quality of life, but there's no improvement for them at all. And again, like many of those who were on welfare here in in America in the 70s and 80s. You have a lot of people just going around in a circle, not going anywhere. And what happens with a lot of males is that they get frustrated and angry as they're sitting in this world, going nowhere with their lives. And this is what leads to a lot of these people becoming frustrated and angry on the side of the migrants. But on the side of the French citizens, they are frustrated and angry because they are being put in a second class status in their own country. And as they watch as migrants come to their country getting all of these benefits, a lot of French citizens are angry and frustrated because they get a lot of benefits as related to their lives. I mean, people in France can retire, it used to be at 62, and live very well until they died. And they could go out here and vacation for an entire month in their country safely until the migrants started coming to the country. And people used to have a quality of life in France, but they see that quality of life being impeded. And this is something that has frustrated a lot of French people and have them thinking about supporting political candidates like Marine Le Pen and thinking about making France French again. And they feel like they're losing their culture as their country has seen their quality of life deteriorate as related to the open border policies of 2009. Now, these open border policies that have been implemented since 2009 have led to a complete decline of quality of life in France for both white French people and black migrants. And what has happened is that the country has been a powder keg for years, and what has happened is with the death of Nahel Marzouk, the entire country basically wound up exploding. And as the country exploded, it exploded because many people in France, again, were on the migrant side, were frustrated because they felt like they were being targeted by police as related to racial profiling. They felt like they were being targeted for arrest, and like Nahel Marzouk, he had a long record. They felt like they were being mistreated. Unfortunately, for many of the migrants, they really didn't understand the deal with white supremacy. That yes, they opened the border, but they only opened the border because they saw a way for politicians to get paid at their expense, and they were not looking to sell them a French version of the American dream. No, like black Americans here, many of those those black migrants were going to be put in a permanent underclass, and that permanent underclass was just something that they were going to use for politicians, especially leftist politicians, to go out here and get earmark money at their expense. Again, the same game that was run here by many of the members of the Blue Party. And that's what has led to all of this rioting going on. Many of the black migrants are frustrated and angry about the years of 15 plus years of police brutality, racial profiling, harassment, and attacks on them. And they have decided to just turn up in the streets because they feel like they have nothing to lose. And they feel like they have nothing to lose because they were promised a better life, but they never got that better life. No, instead of getting the deal that they were promised as related to open borders, all they got was a raw deal, and now they're basically tearing up the country as a way to get back as related to the promises that were not kept. And what has happened here with France is that the leadership is looking real weak because, again, a lot of the leftists pushed these migrants into the country but did not want to go out here and fulfill their promises. And now many of the leftist leaders are looking really weak and ineffective because they brought a group of people into the country without vetting a single individual. And because they didn't vet any of these individuals, they didn't look to see if these individuals would add to improve the quality of life in the country by having skills that would allow them to open businesses or go out here and be able to contribute to society. And instead of looking to create a quality of life for people, the quality of life in France has declined. And what has made things worse is that many of the French people who were natural born. French people are frustrated and angry because the left has tried to make them pay for these migrants by doing things like they wanted to do by trying to put a tax on the cars, I believe, and that led to the yellow vest movement, which made Macron back off. And then he tried to go out here and raise the retirement age past 62, which many French people look forward to. Many French people were used to generations retiring at 62 and living very comfortably, but Macron wanted to end that, and that led to a series of strikes. So, right now, France is a very divided country, and it's a very divided country because France basically is a country that has went on here talking about diversity and inclusion passively, but aggressively was working towards making most of those migrants a permanent underclass that was going to be in perpetual poverty, and a permanent underclass that was going to be in perpetual misery. That was the ultimate purpose of the migrants in France. And again, the migrants are now pushing back and looking to go out here and make these people pay not only for the death of that 17-year-old boy, but also make them pay for over 15 years of broken promises. And they are turning up in the streets worse than what happened with George Floyd, because unlike many black Americans who have a loyalty to this country, these individuals have no loyalty to France, and since they have no loyalty to France as a nation, many of these people feel like they have nothing to lose, and they're willing to destroy that entire country because they have nothing invested in it the way foundational black Americans have something invested in America. Moreover, many black Americans, again, while they have issues with this country, understand that we built this country, but many of those individuals who came to France, they have no connection to the country, so they have no problems destroying institutions that I believe foundational black Americans would never touch, like a church. I mean, these people burnt churches, they burnt libraries. I mean, again, no connections to the culture, no care for the culture, and that is the saddest part about what's going on in France is we're seeing an entire country fall apart, and sadly, the leadership is not looking to lead the nation. No, they planted these seeds and they thought, oh, we'll just let anybody in our country with no standards. And again, they put down a whole bunch of thorns and briars in their country, and those thorns and briars are choking the life out of their country. So when I look at what's happening in France, it's basically something the late Charles Stanley said coming to pass as related to one of the life principles in the Bible, and that is you will reap more than you sow, later than you sow, and greater than you sow. And that's what the people of France are doing, reaping what they sowed. They arrogantly and paternalistically thought they could just bring anybody into their country without ever checking their backgrounds to see if they could contribute to the country. And as they planted these seeds all across the country, they have grown up over the last 15 years to become thorns and briars and have not borne the fruit that the French wanted them to breed as they were out here living in the country for the last 15 years. As they have been out here, they have not borne good fruit for that country. No, what they're getting here is the same thing you get in many modern black communities with the children of the corn. Again, when you don't invest in your people, when you don't invest in building up people, what happens to those people is they grow up to become thorns and briars, and those thorns and briars basically choke the life out of your country because, again, you have to invest in growing the seeds of people. You have to invest in developing people, and that's something that the people in France did not do. No, they did not go out here and look to invest in helping many of the migrants. Again, they were extremely disingenuous. Yes, they gave them welfare in the beginning, the way they gave many of the migrants welfare here in places like New York, but they weren't looking to invest in those people, and even worse, they weren't looking to invest in their own people. And this is why you got the powder keg of a situation, because all they wanted to do was take all of those migrants, turn them into a permanent underclass, look to, in some cases, replace many of the minorities that were currently there. And this has got many on the right saying that this is why diversity is a failure. And the whole thing was is that they were pushing this diversity narrative when in actuality it was, again, passively pushing diversity but aggressively pushing an underclass, and again pushing the underclass because they wanted to keep black people at the bottom of their world, have them do all the cheap labor and live off the benefits of the government earmarks from the programs and live off the cheap labor they would get. This was all about exploiting these people, and these people who were not invested in the French culture, not invested in French society, basically got fed up and looked to, again, in some ways declare war on the French administration. And it's all their own fault because, again, this is them reaping what they sowed back from 2009. And again, this was what everybody was celebrating, that great migration of migrants coming into the European Union. And now, 15 years later, many of those same people who were celebrating the migrants coming to their country are now crying to say that they want these people to leave their country. And again, it's all they're all doing, again, is reaping what they sowed. And all you're seeing in France with these riots is people crying tears about the bitter harvest they created when they planted these seeds 15 years ago. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available for free on Google Play and Smashwords. The Retreat by Lawrence Cherry. If you want to advance in your faith in God, sometimes you have to retreat. Get The Retreat for free on Smashwords and Google Play today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at lulu.com today.